complete and utterly exhausted, acute on chronic sleep deprivation with a little one at home. And the last time I spoke to her was 3 days before she died. And she called me very upset and said, I think I need to find a new job. I'm so exhausted. I have a headache. I'm nauseous. I can't even think straight. I think I've had like 6 hours of sleep. And I said, sweetie, you have to call in tomorrow and take a day to catch up on some sleep. And what she said to me just gives me chills. She said, Michelle, I can't. We're short at work.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Shafer, your host of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about using storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. Today, we are so blessed to have a wonderful fellow physician on the show. Dr. Michelle Chestovich is a physician practicing family medicine, a coach, mom, podcast host of the Remind Yourself podcast, a speaker, and an advocate for awareness of the high risk of female physician suicide, and working towards meaningful changes to the work and training environments that can help decrease the risk of death by suicide for female physicians. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Chestovich.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
I'm so grateful that we connected. We are in a very supportive group together called the PMG, or the Physicians Mom Group, on Facebook together. And you were posting recently, in light of it being September and Suicide Awareness Month, about something that hits really, really close to home for you because it affected your sister. Could you share with us that story?
Yes, absolutely. So on September 17th, it's National Physician Suicide Awareness Day. And I wish I didn't know that date, but I think it's really important that we talk about it because, unfortunately, tragedy struck my family 3.5 years ago when I lost my youngest sister, Dr. Gretchen Butler, to suicide unexpectedly. And her death not only was a complete upheaval for our family, it made me realize that it is a much, much bigger problem. Before I get into that, I just have to acknowledge that Gretchen was a physician, yes, but more than that, she was a mom of 3, and she was an incredible mom who would have done anything for her children. And I think that that's so important to say because as a family doc, I treat a lot of depression and anxiety. And when people used to fill out the PHQ-9 and at the bottom, they'd say maybe they've had thoughts of hurting themselves, I would ask them like, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. Do you have a plan? And people would say, no, I would never do that because I have children. And I used to believe them. Children do not save us. If our brains are that sick, it's a big risk factor. So I didn't mean to go a little bit sideways, but like, yes, we talk about her being a physician woman, and yes, she was, but more than that, she was just an amazing human with a huge heart, so much fun and light in the world, and an amazing, loving mom, partner, sister. But back to the tragedy that struck our family very unexpectedly, I then found out within like a week that we lose 300 to 400 physicians a year to suicide. And that just blew my mind. And it's not like we came together as a family and said, wow, we need to share this information. But we've been very forthcoming from the beginning how she died. This woman was incredible. She won all the awards. She was the like amazing star in our family. I've got a pretty amazing family. And we weren't going to be embarrassed or ashamed about how she died. So even in her obituary, we said that Gretchen died unexpectedly by suicide. And I think raising that awareness is the first step that this happens to amazing people who've got loving and supportive families. I think that that's huge. And then the other thing that I found out after she died is that women physicians, we are 2.5 times the risk as our general peers. 2.5 times the risk. That's huge. And so it's not just Gretchen that this happens to, but when I speak to people, I think to myself, if this could happen to Gretchen, who was the top of her class, always had things organized and together and had the theme parties, didn't just have like a gathering in medical school on a Friday night, said, hey, we're doing a Western theme tonight. If this could happen to a woman who loves everybody and is loved by everybody, none of us are safe.
I appreciate you sharing your sister's story. I know it must be incredibly difficult to go over that, but I'm also grateful that we have this space to remember her
Yes,
and in her memory.
I love talking about her, and she's an amazing spirit. She was an amazing human on earth, and her spirit is very strong and keeps whispering, please keep talking, keep talking. And in sharing her message, I've had women come up to me saying, your sister saved my life. I heard her story and I realized that I was getting really close and I got help. And that's the best we can do here, right? Is to talk about it, normalize it, say, yeah, we're at risk. So what are we going to do to protect ourselves? As a
Right,
primary care
exactly.
doctor, I'm a big believer in prevention. We can't prevent all deaths by suicide, just like we can't prevent all deaths from cancer. But there's a long runway ahead of dying by suicide that I think we in medicine need to be aware of and talk about and incorporate into our life.
Absolutely. And when you discussed Gretchen's life and you were saying, listen, this was a beautiful, intelligent, amazing woman. She was not just a female physician. She was a mom. She was a member of our family, my sister, and she was amazing. She was a wife. And then it comes
She was a
back
stellar
to,
athlete, by the way,
oh,
right? She was on the
wow.
water ski team in college. I mean, anyway, I could go on and on about her. But yes, and then it comes back to, and she had a brain disease.
Mm-hmm. So she was struggling with depression. Was this something that she had struggled with during her life, or was this something that you weren't as a family aware of?
I would say that we were not aware. And I probably depression was sneaking in at the end, but I really think anxiety was more her leading problem. When she was younger, she had had anxiety and had been treated for that. And when she died, she had an 18-month-old. And her little one was born with bilateral cleft lip palate, few other medical issues. And so that was a big stressor for her. And she was going back to work after, I think, like 6 weeks or something crazy. And I said, sweetie, what are you doing going back so early? Well, I have to. And I'm going to need time off later in the year for surgeries and things like that. So she went back quite early. And within a week, she was calling me and said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm really concerned I'm going to make a mistake. I'm just really scared and fearful. I don't think I can do this. I said, sweetie, sounds to me like a little postpartum anxiety kicking in, and this is normal. And why don't you talk to one of my colleagues and, get on medication or a therapist or whatever the doctor thinks, right? I'm your sister and I can advise that. And so she did that. And then a couple weeks later, she's like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I'm like, I feel in control. But it was, a challenging year. And oh, by the way, 6 months later, the pandemic hit. So we, as a very close family who do all the things together and really love being together, we're starting to separate because we were all afraid. All my siblings are in medicine. I have another brother and a sister who are also physicians. And we were all terrified that if we came together, that we would give COVID to our parents and that they would die. And they're healthy, like 70-year-old in their mid 70s, but like that's what we were concerned about. So we did the Zoom Thanksgiving and the Zoom Christmas. And this is where I'm gonna get choked up. Like, we were just getting vaccinated in January, February. We were finally going to be able to see each other again and come together. And she died on March 5th, 2021. She was feeling very isolated. It wasn't just one thing that caused her to die. So I don't know if it's okay if I speak to that now. It's not just one thing that causes you to die by suicide, right? It's complex. And for many people, it is severe depression. And I think that maybe her anxiety was transitioning into depression, but we were unaware. But sleep deprivation was, I think, the leading contributor to her death.
I've heard you speak on the difficulties with regards to her schedule, which is a real risk to female physicians and all physicians in medicine, that especially after, work time restrictions are lifted during residency and you're out as an attending physician, you don't necessarily have protection against being overworked and underslept.
Yeah. And nor do you want to say, hey, I need a little slack, because this lady, she's going to prove 110% I am doing my job and I'm not cutting any corners. She was the one who was relied on for everything. And when she would see something that needed to be fixed, they're like, okay, Gretchen, you take care of the schedule or you do whatever. Like they give her all the things. And she worked with, I think, like 8 guys. And again, I'm not going to disparage the men, but they had a different life and they were older. I like to say, like, too, the first few years we're out as an attending is an at-risk time. When we're in residency, it's really hard. And yet we're with our peers and we're all on the struggle bus and we can commiserate. Now, all of a sudden, you're out and you're working with attendings who've been doing it 10, 15, 20 years. And they're saying to Gretchen, oh, it's no big deal. Like when you're on call on the weekend, you just like, I mean, I sometimes like watch a movie. She, meanwhile, is trying to figure out how to work 17 hours in a day and check in with her family at times, and the big leap, right? Like there's a big leap from med school to residency and residency to attending. She's reading hundreds of scans at a level 1 trauma center. That's a lot. And to be sort of minimized by some of people like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like it was a big deal for her. And she got, pretty comfortable. She was working there for a couple years, but that weekend before she died, she had a crazy weekend and probably only got a few hours of sleep because just when she's wrapping up at midnight, making sure everything is all done. She didn't leave crap for the people. She got everything done, cleaned up. Then her little one would get up. And so she'd go and snuggle with him and, get him tucked back in. And then she'd be up at 5 a.m. before she started reading at 6. So she was complete and utterly exhausted, acute on chronic sleep deprivation with a little one at home. And the last time I spoke to her was 3 days before she died. And she called me very upset and said, I think I need to find a new job. I'm so exhausted. I have a headache. I'm nauseous. I can't even think straight. I think I've had like 6 hours of sleep. And I said, sweetie, you have to call in tomorrow and take a day to catch up on some sleep. And what she said to me just gives me chills. She said, Michelle, I can't. We're short at work. And it's so emotional for me because that is medicine. That is the culture that we live in. And had she taken that day off and slept, she still might have died on that Friday night. She still might have died. I know that might not have been the ultimate thing. Yet the fact that we think we can't take a day because our kids are sick or we have a fever or what have you, like that just contributes to the toxicity. And then after she died, I remember, you go through all the emotions. And at one point, I just kind of like shook my head at anger. I'm like, they figured out the call schedule for the rest of the year. Like, we think we can't even miss a day. And they had their whole schedule for the whole year. And as of like March 10th, like their whole schedule for the rest of the year was changed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people figure it the F out.
Yeah.
And so I just get a little feisty and angry about it because it breaks my heart that she felt such demand. And it breaks my heart knowing that every day women are saying the same thing. I can't. We're short at work. And I'm just here to say, knock it off. Yes, you can.
Well, I so appreciate you and your passion about this because it is what is necessary to change things for us, for our fellow female physicians, so that this doesn't happen anymore because it's happening every day. In the United States, we're losing a physician a day or more to suicide. That's a pretty good indicator that this is a big problem, but we're not having a public outcry, even though every time you lose a physician, when you look at it from a simply practical standpoint, because we know where we work, right? They're going to look at this as a practical problem because we're not hearing a big public outcry about it, but we are hearing a public outcry about the fact that there aren't enough physicians to see patients and that that's a problem. Yet we're not supporting physicians when they are alive, when they need help, when they need a reasonable work schedule, when they need to take maternity family leave because they have a new baby and maybe that baby has health issues. If our patients came to us with a medical condition and asked us to write a letter to explain why they need accommodations at work because they have a significant medical problem, right? And it puts them at risk. We would write that letter. We write those letters all the
100%.
time.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
write those letters all the
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
And
We
don't get
tell
back.
people what to do. And I remember, back in the day when I have 4 children and I had 4 kids under 6 and I was working and delivering babies and doing all these things. And I'd be telling these young mamas that I help them have their baby. I'm like, take care of you, so on and so forth. Meanwhile, I'm inside just stewing and thinking to myself, I want someone to tell me that. I've subsequently learned we can tell ourselves that. And if you need to hear it from us, listeners, you can take time for you because there might not be someone coming, right? We need to learn to realize that we are in charge. But I think just in the system of medicine, I don't like to demonize it, but we just kind of get caught up and we keep doing it how it's always been. Right. And so we think, I can't take time. I don't want to be called not a team player, which is a bunch of gaslighting BS. And we just are so worried what other people are going to think that we forget that this is our life and I'm the captain of the ship. And maybe I'm going to choose something that other people don't prefer. And that's okay because this is my life.
And we want you to be here next year.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it's amazing because, again, I work as a coach with a lot of physicians who are feeling very burnt out, hopefully well before that they're having any real deep brain issues. But we realize, like, if I ask someone how they're doing and is their job sustainable and they burst into tears, I'm like, well, that's not great either. We need to figure out a way to set some boundaries and right size the work you're doing, because otherwise you're going to leave and then we still have a physician shortage. What if you could set some boundaries and maybe you don't do everything for your patient every day, and 2, maybe it's going to take a few weeks to get in with you again. So be it. At least the patients are going to have you around longer. Like, it's really good for your patients to have a sustainable work practice so you can keep doing this. But when we think we have to do everything today, otherwise everyone's going to be upset, well, it's no wonder we contribute to that, right? Like, we're not the problem, right? We aren't causing the burnout. It's the system. But there are things we can do. But it's hard. I mean, we're used to having everybody think we're amazing. I mean, I think about Gretchen, like, everybody loved her. She was amazing because she did all the things.
Yeah.
I wish she would be here, and maybe some people would say, like, wow, she doesn't like work all of the time, and that's okay,
We're so afraid to be the squeaky wheel, but our families need us, and our colleagues need us. They don't necessarily need us to show up as Superwoman. And I really appreciate how you really dive into, okay, yes, there's toxicity in the workplace, in the systems that we need to address. We need to make changes because they're not sustainable. They don't work. When we look at the physician workforce, it's now 50% female in most countries. And it has been for several years now. So this needs to work for female physicians. We have to make this work, not only for female physicians, but for all physicians. This is a pressing issue. So we need to make those systemic changes. We need to have accountability for them. We need to say, when there are issues in a system, we need to be having meetings about that, just as we are about billing and just as we are about service line health. We need to be talking about how our institution is working for the people who are working for it. That being said, then we need to take our power back as individuals, because it's so critical on that path to reclaiming our stories and really being present for our own lives, and say, I don't have to be Superwoman. Figure out your why. Why is it that I feel I need to show up as Superwoman? It may be because I'm explicitly told that by my colleagues. It may be because of a lot of ideas I have in my head, limiting beliefs that society and culture placed there a long time ago. And I'm still operating under this idea that they are the truth, when really they're just hurting me and not helping me.
Yeah. And I think also a lot of us women are very high achieving, and we've accrued a lot of gold stars and wonderful accolades along the way. And so we just get in a pattern of like saying yes to everything and feeling really guilty if we start to set some boundaries and say no. And I'm like, we got to flip that paradigm on its head, because it doesn't seem to be working. So maybe we should take an example. I love doing this example of like following the lead of the heart. The first artery off the heart is to itself, the myocardium, because the heart knows that it has to be nurtured and strong in order to be able to pump blood throughout the whole body. So when we mamas say, well, I got to take care of everyone else first, I'm like, no, feed yourself first. Just like the heart.
Yeah.
She knows.
You mentioned with your patients having this kind of out-of-body experience, a frustrating experience where you're telling them one thing and you are recognizing that your life is not modeling what you are recommending for your patients to be the healthiest and happiest that they can be. When did that start to shift for you so that you could have more balance and be making sure that you are nourishing yourself first so that you can show up for all the people
Yeah.
that matter to you?
Yeah. So even though I talked this big game for a majority of my career, I did not. I just did all the things and worked a little harder, got up a little earlier, and told myself, like, well, I should be able to handle it, right? Like, I'm a doc, like, yeah, that's great for them, but like, just, try a little harder. But I did always know that like sleep and exercise were very important for me. So I've always been pretty good at that. And so that kind of would get me up and down through some of the episodes of burnout that I was having. And I think, maybe it was like 5 or 6 years ago. It wasn't that long ago that I just would like feel so guilty. Like my panel of OB patients as a family doc, like I knew these beautiful young women and now they're having babies of their own. And it was just getting so busy and I didn't know how to say no, or no one really taught me how to say no, that I had a couple like months in a row where I had like a dozen deliveries a month. And as a family doc, like I'm on for them unless I say like I'm out of town and then there's a backup. But of course I felt too guilty to do that. And I just was really torn. And I think I had a couple of women in labor on the same day as my kiddos' birthdays. And so like I just felt really torn. And I think it just sort of came to a head like, I can't keep doing this. And then another time driving, I live in Minnesota, so driving in the middle of the night to the hospital in a snowstorm and a blizzard, thinking, I just want to run off the road, not to like die, but to like just take a break. I just kind of want to go in the ditch. I don't want to go to the hospital tonight and do this delivery. I want to go in the ditch and not have to go in. And then I just realized like maybe I can set some boundaries. And I decided that night after being with her all night long and then having to go right from clinic 8 o'clock in the morning, go to clinic all day long, feeling sick. I thought to myself, I don't want to do OB anymore. I'm making this decision. It's been 18 years. It's been great. And I'm done. It took me another 6 months to share it with my colleagues because I was feeling so guilty and I was feeling like I'm going to disappoint them. To fast forward then even a couple more years, I heard about coaching and I got a coach. And within a matter of a month, I was like, oh my, there are a lot of things that I was thinking that I didn't realize. I thought that the world just was this way and that I just had a guilt cloud over my head. And I can change that up. I have a lot more control than I think. And I felt
Mm.
so much stronger and healthier within about a month. And I remember telling my husband, this sounds crazy. We're out on a date night. And I said, this sounds crazy, but I want to become a life coach because I need to share this information with others. And from then on, I just felt so much more empowered. And like I describe it as a life jacket. So I'm not drowning anymore. For so many years, I felt like I was drowning. And now I have a life jacket. I still have work to do. I got to swim to shore. Sometimes there are a lot of waves, but with the tools that I've learned and I love to share with others, it's like, yeah, it's not as hard. So I don't know if I quite answered your question, but I think you said like, where did you make the change? I probably suffered pretty seriously for about 15 years. Never as severe as my sister. I just felt really bad because like I'd cry myself to sleep thinking I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad doc, I'm a bad wife, I'm a bad friend. Oh my gosh, I haven't even touched base with my parents, right? So like just feeling a lot of not self-pity, but just feeling like I wasn't doing a good job. But like that's as bad as it got for me, and then I would cry and I would sleep and then I would, be better. So I would undulate, but never so severely down.
I think it's really important to normalize that these feelings occur and not to get stuck in the stigma. I believe the most recent statistic is that 1 in 4 physicians have contemplated suicide.
Yeah. To talk about it. And just like, again, if you deal with patients and like they're out mowing the lawn and they're noticing some heartburn or some chest pressure, you're like, wow, we got to investigate that. You got to let me know. So too, it doesn't mean we need to rush them 911, got to go to the hospital in an ambulance. So too, if people are having fleeting thoughts of like, you know what, I think I'd be better off not here. This is too much. That's just a sign to tell somebody. Because again, the more I've spoken about this, I've had so many people come up to me and say, it was almost me. It was a week of call nights, or it was in my surgery residency, and I was having these dark, intrusive thoughts. And I'm like, why are we not talking about this? I had no idea. So you're not alone if you're having thoughts that like life is getting really hard. It's just a sign, like, tell somebody. Maybe you need to slow something down. Maybe you need medication or up your therapy. I don't know the answer, but tell someone that you trust.
Right. We don't know the answers. They know their answers, but they may have never been in an environment where they were given the opportunity to really get down to the driving forces and to then make adjustments in their mindset and in their life that will allow them to be happier, to learn to choose themselves, to stop people pleasing. Because we know, as female physicians in medicine, I mean, it is a setup. The people who go into medicine, especially as women, I think are not born
Yeah.
people pleasers, but they've been made people pleasers by some system in their early childhood, and
Well, we
here
get,
they
I think,
are
that
in
reward,
medicine.
right? Like we're the
Yeah.
first one done with our little worksheet, and then the teacher says, "Hey, could you please help this little one who's struggling?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be great." And it feels good, like it feels something, until it tips so far that we're just like being asked to do everything, and we just don't really know how to say no, or we're just so terrified of disappointing others. And my thought is like, oh my gosh, like, yes, it's hard, and it's not that hard to get over it, but it helps to have someone showing you the way. And I think we all need to band together and say, yeah, this isn't, saying yes to everything isn't doing it right. And if you love it and you want to say yes, great. I think it was Glennon Doyle a few years ago. She's like, listen to your body. Unless it's a hell yes, it's a no. And I
Mm-hmm.
love when I work with my clients, I'm like, I know it's going to feel gross, but when someone asks you a question and you feel nauseous in your stomach, that's a sign that your body's crying out to say no. And if you can't say no right away, like, thanks for asking, but that's not going to work, say, hey, I'm trying this new thing. I'm going to get back to you in 24 hours. And then ask yourself at home, what do I think about this? And if you feel sick to your stomach, just a polite no. Don't keep kicking the can down the road. Well, I'll think about it. No, they want to know too. It's okay to say no.
Yeah. They want to know your no. They don't want you
Yeah,
to say yes.
that's
And
right.
then it's a problem because you don't really want to say yes. And then the results aren't going to be what they would be if you had just said, you know what, no. And then they said, okay, they're frustrated.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not. Maybe they're fine in that moment. But then they go find someone that's their enthusiastic yes. It helps everyone when we hold our boundaries. When we don't have boundaries, it hurts us. And it doesn't really help the people that we think we're helping as much as we think we are. So it's really important. I want to get back to something you said about when you were driving and had those intrusive thoughts. And you mentioned how, I didn't want to die. I just, this was too much. And I didn't want to do this, right? It needed to change. In that moment, this was unsustainable. And I think it's really important for people to understand that there are studies that show that survivors of suicide attempts to end their lives by suicide, those survivors almost unanimously will say, I didn't want to die. I just wanted this to be over. I wanted this pain to be over. I needed something to change. And I couldn't figure out a way to make that happen because I felt hopeless. And so this is the only thing that made sense to me in this senseless time. And that shows us what an incredible opportunity we have to show support and be good listeners. And in that moment of feelings of hopelessness, give a different perspective to someone who's suffering and who needs our help.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think people feel very much backed into a corner. And I think you mentioned before polarized thinking. We docs are very polarized in our thinking, like it's right or it's wrong. And so when people's brain is really sick, they get backed into a corner and feel trapped, which can be very dangerous because you think, I either have to stay in this horrible situation and be miserable, or I can't be here. There are like 500 other million choices, but you can't see it when your brain is that sick, which again, I don't like. At the point that Gretchen left this earth, she wasn't choosing to like not love us. She wasn't thinking about us. I really think her brain was just at a point where it's just like, I'm in a burning building and I have to get out. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a conscious, and I've read a lot of books about suicide or people who've nearly died by suicide, explaining what's on in their head. They get in what's called a suicide tunnel. And we don't have to talk too much about it, but when it gets so severe, it's like they're in a tunnel and all they see is a pinprick of light. It's so dark. They see a pinprick of light, and that pinprick of light is suicide. That's what they see as they're out, which gives me goosebumps as I say it. And so I think we have to do all of this work well ahead of it, right? But if someone's starting to have intrusive thoughts, and interestingly, I've had a lot of moms reach out to me and say, it was almost me. Well, not, I mean, nearly a dozen. And when they just start to think like, I think people would be better off without me, like that's such a lie, but your brain, you believe it. And so again, please, if you're having any thoughts like, I think I just don't want to be here anymore, tell someone, and let's get comfortable talking to our colleagues about this. Even saying something like, if someone's really struggling, or, oh my gosh, I just can't really deal with it, and we kind of get dramatic, just saying like, wow, sometimes when people talk that way, they may also just think like life is too hard and they can't be here any longer. Are you ever having thoughts like that? Just to like bring that into the conversation. It's okay to ask somebody if they're having thoughts of killing themselves, if it seems appropriate. That isn't going to make somebody think, oh yeah, that's a great idea. That's not how it works.
That's such an important part. Yeah. Being able to bring something into the light, it's going to help you deal with it. When we are isolated and hiding things,
Yeah.
that's not going to get anyone to safety or the help that they
Yeah.
need. Absolutely.
Which reminds me, another thing that contributed to my sister's death was a big shame spiral that afternoon. Something happened at work and she went into a big shame spiral. And I think we in medicine need to do a better job talking about mistakes, talking about how we deal with them and how it's normal and how we can learn self-compassion to not continually berate ourselves and shame ourselves and make us hide further, because that is also a recipe for disaster. I personally think if there's a bad outcome, an unexpected death, maybe a mistake, which again, we're human, is going to happen, there should almost be like a SWAT team that comes in and surrounds either the physician or the team to say, wow, this happened. How can we support you? We know that this is an at-risk time. Instead of people just like hoping and praying that like everything's going to be fine. Or maybe people check in once, like, I think we need to know that those are at-risk time. And on my podcast, maybe a year and a half ago, I had Dr. Laura Fortner, who is an OBGYN, and she also is a coach helping with people who've had malpractice issues. That again, it should just be like a big blaring light that if someone is served, like people need support and love, because that's also very common. People don't talk about it, but like nearly 95% of at-risk specialties are like served at some point. So let's normalize it, talk about it, get the support we need instead of just berating ourselves and shame. That's why I brought that up, because like when we hide in shame, that just amplifies your risk.
Shame is such a useless feeling that we impose upon ourselves. And, I think Brene Brown discusses this very effectively in her body of literature. So if someone feels like they're someone who really struggles with feelings of shame, I think she has an incredible body of work too to dive into that, because mindset work on that is really key to helping you kind of reclaim your autonomy and how you really feel about something, instead of these external, forces like shame and guilt that really aren't effectively helping you do the things that you want to do, show up in the ways that you want to show up. They're not going to help you get there.
100%. Yeah, she has amazing work. And I can't remember which way she says it, but I think she says where shame is driving, perfectionism is in the passenger seat, or vice versa. But shame and perfectionism go hand in hand. And so many of us high achieving perfectionists, I'm a reforming perfectionist, I think she says, or reforming people pleaser too. I also steal that from Brene Brown. It's realizing that there is no such thing as perfect, and how can I teach myself like, yes, I'm human, and yes, I'll make mistakes, and I don't need to make that mean, because shame makes it mean I'm a horrible person, versus I'm human and I make a mistake, and how can I learn from this? How can I be kind to myself? So yeah, she does great work. Her book Gift of Imperfection is beautiful. If you have a lot of perfectionist tendencies, which is probably everybody listening, I highly recommend that book.
I've listened to all of hers. I tend to prefer them on audiobook because her newer books she reads, and I just love her candor. I don't know if you've read them in print or if you've listened to
I've
them on
read them. Yeah.
audiobook.
Yeah.
So if you love them as much as I do, I know you've already purchased them, but consider getting them an audiobook, because having the experience of hearing her read them,
Yeah, I love her voice. She's amazing.
yeah, that's really impactful, because she is such a vulnerable human being. And in her moments where she's not vulnerable, she's very accountable for
Yeah, yeah.
those
She's just
moments.
yeah, she's very down to earth.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
very much resonates with me.
And I think, women in medicine, we often, maybe not all of us, but many of us have had to really have this cape, this superwoman cape, and hide behind this shield of perfectionism simply to survive and to prove that we belong. Because,
Mhm.
when we went into medical school, that was really some of the first years where it was becoming half and half, women in
Mhm.
medicine. And I don't know if you've had this experience. I can recall as a young medical student being very casually told all of the dangers of women in medicine and how it was going to really negatively affect the future of medicine, that all of a
Interesting.
sudden, yeah,
Interesting. And
that was really
now
coming
studies
about.
show that women have more amazing outcomes. So that's pretty fun.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
we have higher rates of burnout, and if you're in clinic or get messages from patients, we get more patient messages and staff interruptions, because again, it's that whole being afraid to set boundaries and people pleasing. So it's a wonderful thing that we take such great care of our patients. But I love to tell you, it can be both. You can take amazing care of your patients and set boundaries and say no.
So that you're here to take care of them another
That's
day,
right.
because
That's
it has
right.
to be sustainable.
And the other thing is too, also just life outside of medicine. If you have children, again, we aren't just high achievers in our work realm. We want to do all the things for our kids, make sure they have all the activities, do all the enrichment things. I tell you what, if you have Pinterest, you think you need to have these Pinterest parties, I will just tell you that your kids want you. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Sure. Give them love. I love working with people saying, what is your list of things you need to do to be a great mom? And they write a page and they feel guilty because they're not achieving all that. I should be doing this. I shouldn't be doing that. I'm like, what if we simplify this? Again, you get to decide what you want your rules to be, but let's write our own darn rules. What if you write the rules of like, I love my kids and I provide like the basics? And I will tell you wholeheartedly that that is enough. I see my niece and nephews doing really well in life right now. Their dad is phenomenal, and we have a family that loves them and swoops in. But their dad, I give him so much credit, phenomenal. And they miss their mom every day. And they just would love a mom, not someone who does all the things. But by the way, she did do all those fun things. Instead of just like a pool in the backyard, let's have popsicles and let's set up like an obstacle course to jump into the waiting, pool in the backyard. She was pretty fun. And yet, what if we could just make it simpler for us? That it's enough for me to give my kids a hug and say, I love you. Because some days we get home late, right? Or you're doing delivery or you have an OR add on and we feel really guilty. Yes, I get it. That's how we've been socialized. But just keep reminding yourself, I am enough. I love my kids. Gave them a hug today. They were asleep, but I kissed them anyway. It's pretty darn good.
Or a note in the lunchbox.
Yeah. I mean, they're just little things, but we need to realize that that's enough. I think a lot of us high achievers think, well, that's just like a participation ribbon. That's not good. No, stop it. Write your own rules. Don't need
You
to do
know,
everything to the nth degree. We can ratchet it down and say, like, this is enough. My generation of women, I think you're a bit younger than me. Like, we were told, like, yeah, do whatever you want. Be an astronaut, be a surgeon. That's great. And be Mrs. Cleaver. So, like, we're trying to do all the things, right? Work like we don't have a family and then have a family like we don't have a job. Like, ladies and gentlemen, like, let's just chill out and just lower our expectations a little bit. I know it's hard because we're high achievers, but simplify.
I love this. And I had this visualization when you were talking about, as a mom, writing your own list. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't help, my mind took me to a place where I also imagined sitting down with your children and asking them, what makes mom a great mom? What are the things that mom does that really bring you joy and make you feel loved? and
Yeah.
see what they write down. How
Yeah.
amazing would that be? And just forget your list and just
Yeah.
kind of say, okay,
And
this week
it's
we're going to do 1, 2, 3.
yeah, and it's simple. It's gonna be like, I loved when you snuggle with me before bed. I love it when you read me an extra book, even though you said you were only gonna read 2, you read me 3.
Yeah.
I love yeah, I mean, it's gonna be really simple, lovely stuff. I love it when I'm scared in the middle of the night that you, like, take me in your bed and hold me. It's really simple, and again, it's not our fault, it's just we've been high achievers and always wanted like, a 96% was never good enough for me, like, I got it was an A, but I wanted a 98, right? Like, so, like, I get it that we've trained our brain this way, but if it's not working well for you, if you're feeling really overwhelmed and stressed and just not loving things, like, talk to somebody and figure out how can you turn down the dial a little bit. But again, we've mentioned it a couple times, this black or white thinking, polarized thinking. We think we're going to get an A where we're a failure. There's so much in between.
But when we recognize that if we are someone who has children, when we recognize that truly what they want from us is our presence and our love and our support in those moments where they feel vulnerable, right? That those are the things that make them the happiest. And we zoom out a bit. What is it that we need at
Yeah.
work and in
Yeah.
all of our relationships? We need the same.
We need to feel safe. We need to feel like we belong
Exactly.
and that we're
So,
good enough. I mean, it's just like Brene Brown all wrapped up in Run, right? Like we do
yeah.
need to feel that. And we want to, I love that she says too, like we belong versus we fit in. And I've talked with I just brought my second child to college and I'm like, you're meeting a lot of new people, but be you. You will find the people that you belong with. Because when we try to fit in, it's very uncomfortable. And many of us are working feeling like we're just trying to fit in. Right? I mean, again, I knew as a young physician mom that I wanted to work not full time. I loved my job. I loved being a physician. I loved helping babies be born. And I knew that I wanted to have kids and spend more time with them. That's not the right way for everybody. And that's okay. But if you're thinking like, I wish things were a little bit different, but that's not how it is with everybody else, like, again, this is your life and you get to decide. Even if it's against the grain, that's fine.
And it's important to understand that our work life is a big part of our life, and we need to find spaces and create spaces in our workplaces that work for us and not just suffer in silence,
Yeah.
because that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
big chunk of our life and it will affect our mental health and our health in general if there are really big issues that we're just covering up, pushing to the side, and not addressing. To that end, I know you've done a lot of speaking and advocacy work to try to bring more attention to this issue after your sister died from suicide. What are ways that, beyond the important modalities of coaching and therapy and support in our support systems at home, what are ways that in the work setting you feel we could improve the quality of life and the work environment for female physicians so that this risk goes down?
Love that question. Thank you. Before I get to like big things to change, I think it starts with remembering we too are human. And I go back to the basics as a family doc, what I talk to my patients about. Are you getting sleep? Are you getting enough exercise? Hey, physicians listening, you too are human. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting adequate nutrition? Are you moving your body? Are you finding time for love and connection during your 168 hours per week? We can do more than that, but it's just like we try to fix all these other things. If you're not getting good sleep or finding love and connection, like it's not going to solve the problem. So that's like the minimum baseline, right? Like Maslow's hierarchy, right, of
Hierarchy of
needs.
needs.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Like we
Yeah.
need to be meeting those basic needs. And then above that, but that's hard for us, right? Because we're like, oh my God, I've got more to do. Sleep can wait. Sleep can't wait. Being awake for over 24 hours is a blood alcohol equivalent of zero point 0.1. And people are operating and people are making life or death decisions. Truckers and airline pilots have time limits for a reason. Would you want to get on a plane with a pilot who's been awake for over 24 hours? I don't think so. And yet we allow our surgeons, we allow our emergency physicians, my sister who was a radiologist making life or death decisions, does this person go to the OR or not? We don't take that into consideration. We just think like, oh, it's just nice to get sleep. Someday I'll get sleep. Stop it. This is your brain. Your brain goes cuckoo crazy. It is a form of torture. I'm very sorry. I'm going off on this because it's so important. It is a form of torture, sleep deprivation. And yet we just go through in our medical training thinking like it's no big deal. It is a big deal. Stop it. Decide for you what you need. I unfortunately need more sleep than the average person, right? So I make sure that that happens. So beyond that, to work with somebody to realize like, oh, my brain is telling me I have to do everything for everybody because otherwise I feel really guilty. This is like all or nothing thinking or, limiting beliefs. I'm going to teach myself. And again, whether you do it with a coach or a therapist, I am a great doctor and I can't do everything, at least not today, over time, right? So we need to start to space out what we think we can accomplish. We really overwhelm ourselves, try to get it all done today, all done this weekend. My whole to-do list is going to get done this weekend. Space it out, my friends, right? And so I think it's really as simple as like deciding what you want. You kind of talked about like the values. What is it that I desire? If it's your desire to get home and have dinner a majority of the nights with your family, like look at the math. What time does that mean I need to leave? And then work backwards. Okay, so then I need to set some boundaries with patients. When they come in with the back of the envelope list, I'm going to have to say like, wow, that's amazing. We're not going to be able to handle all that today. Let's tackle a couple of things. So it's a few little things grouped together, but I think a lot of it comes down to setting boundaries and not saying yes to everything, and also learning self-validation instead of external validation. We're so good at getting all the gold stars and the A's, but in order to do this work, we need to learn self-validation to know I am a good doctor, I am a good mom, and I can't do all the things. Does that make sense? And then we go from there. I'm a big proponent of coaching, and I mean I know you are as well as a coach. I love to say there are journal articles, JAMA articles, showing that coaching is an evidence-based solution for burnout. I've been on a lot of wellness committees over the years, and people spin around. What do you think we should do? Should we have like more snacks in the doctor's lounge? Should we have like a meal once a month? What should we do? I'm like, how about the evidence-based solution? We do that for everything else in medicine. We don't think like, oh, do you think we should try this antibiotic? Or do you think we should take them back to the OR? How about we do what shows the best results? So it is my hope to raise awareness, not only about the high incidence of suicide, but like coaching is a solution that works. It's not magic, but it empowers us to make some of these changes because all of you listeners are really smart. It's not rocket science for us to say like, oh, you need to set some boundaries and say, no, why aren't we doing it? Because it feels uncomfortable. That's what coaching helps you through, to realize like, oh, I can do this. And I am not a narcissistic a-hole. I say no, and I'm not a narcissist. And so it is my hope by talking about coaching as well, that more organizations kind of become aware like, oh, this is really good. Welcome to our organization. Here's a badge. Here's your parking card. Here's your coach you're meeting with a couple of times a month. That's my hope. And it's starting to happen. I mean, I think it's like the tip of the iceberg, but the more we talk about it and realize that would probably be helpful. Everything for me goes through the lens of, would this have helped my sister? Her hospital had a beautiful like meditation place on the second floor. Do you know who wouldn't leave her workstation to go and meditate if she was having a hard time? My sister. She's not going to leave work. But what if every Tuesday at 9 a.m. it was on her schedule to do that? I'm not saying that meditation was going to like solve that problem, but for instance, like what if you had someone to talk to about not only how to be able to set boundaries and not feel horrible, but also, oh, by the way, all the trauma we deal with as docs, no one talks about that. We just shove that down and shove it under the bed. That also contributes to mental health issues. So.
Coaching is about learning how to gather the data that we are disregarding. We are programmed as humans to focus on the negative, to see the mistakes we make, to see where we could improve. And a big part of coaching is getting to the why and also helping to shift the perspective so you can gather that data that shows that you are succeeding. Look at all these things you did today and help change your perspective and help you really move forward in life rather than getting stuck in these feelings of shame and not enoughness. And it really makes me think about when we're having those thoughts of hopelessness, when we are suffering from moral injury, potentially from burnout, or we have other mental health challenges, and we're having thoughts of harming ourselves. Having gone through coaching, we have had the opportunity to say, wait, that's not evidence-based thinking, right? We're physicians. We practice EBM, or, for someone not in medicine, evidence-based medicine in every part of our life, essentially. The way we raise our kids, the way we take care of our patients, we are always using evidence. But yet we let this kind of stinking thinking affect how we think about ourselves and our potential in life.
And I think before I got coaching, I just thought my thoughts were true. And I think most of the world does. If you think it enough, it's a belief. It feels really true. But when I learned that, like, oh, thoughts are like clouds in the sky, they go by and it's not true or it's not false, it's just a thought. I was like, what? We are not our thoughts. Like, that's what you learn. And it blew my mind. I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay. So of course I have a lot of these negative thoughts, but I can have some self-compassion. Like, oh yeah, well, I've thought them a lot, but it's not the truth. And so
Exactly.
again, I love that you brought up the negativity bias. We as docs have, not only just as humans, negativity bias, we've ingrained it even more going to medical school. And so we do perseverate on that. Nothing's gone wrong here, but this is one of my favorite questions that I ask myself as well as my clients when we get stuck there. What are you forgetting to remember? Like, oh, I'm a horrible mom. I haven't seen my kids in 2 days. What are you forgetting to remember? I love them. I made sure that they were taken care of. I've got food for them. Like, our brain doesn't want to see that. It just focuses on the negative. So that's just one little example. But I love that when you feel backed into a corner, ask that. That really helps look at other views. Now, if someone's really, really sick or hopeless, that's probably not the question that's going to help. But just knowing, hey, you're not alone and I'm here with you and help is available. That's what I tell people, right? Let's talk about this so we don't get down so far on that sick brain. I mean, I've been at conferences and women are at the beach talking about their uteruses falling out and like, who do you see? And I've got like urinary incontinence and they're talking about that very freely. I'm like, hey, how about we just normalize, like, who's your therapist? What's your dose of sertraline? Like, how about that? We really, it would make it easier for us. And then again, as a primary care doc, I believe in prevention. What can we do on the regular? We are an at-risk profession. You wouldn't go down the Grand Canyon without a life jacket and probably a guide to get you down, unless you're an amazing like raft person, right? That's not how I call it, but ever. So now you are in medicine, you know you're at risk. So what are you going to do? Besides the basic needs of sleep and movement and connection, what else? Maybe a therapist regularly, maybe a support group with physician women or, colleagues. Maybe look into coaching. Maybe your organization has coaching. Maybe give it a try. It's always scary to try new things. But like, worst case scenario, like, yeah, that's not for me. I think we need to do stuff more proactively. And you're not the problem. It's the system is broken, but there are things we can do to feel better and make sure that we're feeling safe and secure with a life jacket on.
And you are worth it. You are worth it. This investment in yourself.
100%. Yeah, it is. And I think we need to prove it. I mean, that's a whole other thing, right? We think we need to earn our worth. No, we are just worthy as humans, but we get so caught up in, I'm a physician and I've got this degree and that degree, like, and it feels really bad to like, they take that away, or we think we need to do more to prove it. Like that, I didn't figure that out until I worked with a coach a bit, but like, yes, we will keep saying it. You are worthy. You are enough. Just being here on earth, even if you leave medicine, if it really comes to a point where like, you know what, this isn't for me, I'm feeling so burnt out and crispy and I'm not healthy and well, please tell somebody and get out. And even if a lot of people are like, well, if I'm not in medicine, who am I anymore? A lot of people love you and you're there. Like if we could bring Gretchen back, Mike, her husband's like, I don't care if she's a pumpkin farmer and we live in a cardboard box. We didn't love Gretchen because she was an amazing physician. We loved her because she was Gretchen. And so too, whoever's listening, people love you because of you. Not for what you do, not for how much money you make, especially your kiddos. Boy, they sure love you.
That is such an important reminder that you are enough. You are so important and you are worthy of love, not just from those people, but learning how to love yourself and show up for yourself every day. And I so appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your sister's story, your family's story, and also how through your coaching, as well as your work as a physician, that you are really trying to move the needle on this issue and improve the lives of women who are suffering and dealing with this every day. It's so incredibly important. I want to remind our audience that the National Suicide Lifeline is 988. You can text or call them. And Dr. Chestovich, how can people get a hold of you if they are looking for coaching or want to learn more about you after the show?
Yeah, thank you. As you previously mentioned, I also have a podcast called Remind Yourself, and I offer just simple tips that can help you feel better. That is on any listening platform. And I also have a website, www.mamadoclifecoach.com. I'm on Instagram, Mama Doc Life Coach, and Facebook. I believe I'm Michelle Chestovich on Facebook. And so I'm here for you to support you in any way. I do a lot of free master classes. I love helping people get their notes done more efficiently so they get their evenings back. That's a really good start to help feel like your job is sustainable. And so there are a lot of free resources on my website and on my social media pages. And you can also access it from my podcast. So thank you so much for shining a light on this really important topic. And thank you for the work that you do as well, each and every day, bringing all this great information to your listeners.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you here. And thank you so much to our listeners. I know that this has been a really emotional and deep episode. So if you need to take time to just breathe and contemplate, please take that time for yourself. If you are having intrusive thoughts of harming yourself, if you are just needing a little bit of crisis support, please get help. If you are in an emergency situation, you can call 911 in the States, go to your local emergency department. If you're just wanting to talk to someone, as we said earlier, you can call 988 or you can text 988 so that you know that there's someone waiting on the other end of that phone who made time in their day to be there because they're waiting for someone to call them. They want to help you. Let them help you. We all need help sometimes. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely. You are not alone and help is available. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, storytellers, for being here on this special Saturday edition of Talks with Dr. Shafer. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss any of our inspiring and moving guest episodes and solo episodes in the future. I'm so glad you're here. Stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.